Welcome to Craig Baxter.
Guys, welcome to the Katie Black Show. I'm honored today. I have with me
Mark Mynhier.
Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
It's a great day. I'm doing great. And then I started working for them. LAPD has as with most major departments, we don't care what you knew before, we will train you on our way of doing things. And it's almost a 2-year process to become fully trained as a forensic photographer. And I know that most people say, hey, I can take pictures, I can do it. And I always explained it either from the witness stand or to victims, we're not taking pictures, we're documenting evidence. And the documentation is a whole different skill set than just taking a picture. I mean, we all take pictures of our kids at Christmas or whatever, especially with cell phones. So it was just a matter of learning the proper documentation procedures that could survive a court scrutiny. And that really is a whole different ballywick. You just have to, you got one shot to do everything. There's no redos. And that's the biggest thing that most people don't get. Whatever you do is there for life.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, because we dealt with a lot of, murders and rapes and child molestations, it literally is the life of the person, either the suspect or the victim. It's their life, and we have one shot to do it, and it has to be done like 99.9% perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a whole different standard.
It
was so everyone remembers OJ, right?
Yes.
I was hired right after OJ. And I actually ended up doing, because when you first start, you do all the groundwork. So I was the one who was sitting there literally printing 14,000 prints of OJ case at a time. So that was the time frame.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And people wonder why we insist that all parties in the cases have to pay for their own. They don't get that some of these are literally would cost the department $20,000 or $30,000 that could otherwise be going to victims, be going to department resources, be going to training, be going to things that are important for the citizens to be able to still feel safe. So that's the example I always point to when people say, well, why do I have to pay for these prints? Well, it's either everyone or no one, and we can't do no one, so it has to be everyone. So that was a time frame, and it was a very volatile time. It was after some riots, obviously, and we were starting. It was the beginning of the mistrust of a lot of police departments with the riots and stuff, and the LA community has a history of distrust between minorities and the police. When Bill Bratton came in, he did so much to change that. And it was a wonderful policies. And we started getting cops in the street shaking hands and stuff like that. But it was a lot of the distrust. I didn't wear a uniform unless there was like riots and stuff, because we want our civilians who don't carry guns to be able to come and go safely without being identified. So our cars didn't look like cop cars. We didn't wear uniforms unless there were riots. So one of my best work friends is now in jail for the rest of her life because I put her there. She was a bad cop. She killed someone. It was a cold case that I helped solve. So the bad ones need to go away. No problem with that. I think what most of America needs to realize is we don't need to look badly upon cops. We need to look at cops as people who are either mistrained or need more training, and let's push money that direction. I am all for national standards for forensics and national standards for use of force, because that's the only way that we'll make sure that everyone is held for the same standards, which was part of what my job was with LAPD. Also was 3 weeks a year, I went off with the FBI to write those standards. So I'm a huge believer in those standards that I helped write. Obviously I believe in them.
Again, a lot to unpack, but wanted to circle back around. Mark dropped that he put his former friend or friend in jail. Can I speak about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what Mark is talking about is the Stephanie Lazarus case, which I kind of vaguely remember, but went and did some research once I found that you had a connection to that. My understanding is Stephanie was LAPD 86. I'm blanking on her name, but a victim was murdered in the Van Nuys area, I think. And 20 years later, they discovered that it was Stephanie who was connected to this young woman's husband that was an ex of the husband. Am I explaining this correctly?
Right. It was the husband was her ex-boyfriend.
Ex-boyfriend. And well, first of all, at what point is a case considered cold? How many years have to go by?
It varies because as long as you're pursuing viable leads, it's an open case. When the viable leads go away, it's a cold case. So that can be anywhere from 6 months to 3 years to, look at the Grim Sleeper, for instance. That never really became a cold case because even though he had 14 years where he wasn't using the same MO to kill, he was still killing. So it never truly became a cold case. In Stephanie's case, it sat for
20 years, give or take, right?
Yeah. I think it was like 18 years before it was reopened. And this is where families come in. When families come in and say, hey, what's happening with the case? But also cold cases recycle. Those that they think they have a potential for solving, they recycle them. They dropped the case on my desk. And there's 2 cases that were similar in some way. They dropped the case on my desk saying, hey, this is cold. Can you look at it? Can you see what we missed? I didn't handle, obviously I don't do all the forensics. This isn't like some TV shows where you have one person who does all the forensics for everything. I do digital multimedia, photos, videos, that sort of thing. Okay. But we take tons of pictures of these scenes. And so we went back over it and I started putting some stuff together. And actually it had to do with a dry cleaning receipt that was smudged and wasn't very readable the first time around. And that's what tied her to the case. And then I started going back and I sent it over to a couple other forensic people for them to look at certain things too. And then I went and dropped on the desk and they're like, oh no, we cleared her years ago. And I go, because she was one of the first suspects. The first person you look at is the people who are intimately in their lives. And I go, no, this is why, bing, 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 bing. Okay, you need to go talk to this person over here for this forensics. And, I gave them everyone else to talk to, but boom, 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 and laid it out. And at that point, they went to her and they said, we talked to Mark and this person and this person. I honestly don't remember who the other forensics people were. And this is the evidence they got. And she's like, okay, that's it. The weird, odd thing is that she was one of the top art detectives in the world. She, and I think that she had been carrying around the guilt of what she did for so long that it drove her to be better at what she did, trying to make amends for something you can never make amends for. The way you make amends is you go to the cops and say, hey, I did this. I confess, put me in jail.
Yeah.
That's making amends to it 18 years earlier. But I think that she was driven to be a good cop because she did something so horrific.
So you mean she essentially
never make up for it.
Sorry, so essentially you're saying she overcompensated.
Absolutely. Everyone knew Stephanie. She was a little bit of an odd duck, but she was a great detective. She was just dogged on these things. And she only dealt with high-end art theft, the $10 million art thefts. Those are the ones that she dealt with. Her and her mentor, whose name slips me right now because it's been 20 years. They were both just phenomenal. And they would get calls from all over the country and sometimes other places in the world to work on these things. But I think one of the things that pissed me and the other detectives off probably the most is here was somebody who was in our work lives that we knew, liked, and respected. There was a murderer. And it pissed us off that we never saw it. And that she would actually betray the rest of us by doing that.
Right.
That's where the, good cops have zero tolerance for bad cops. They want all of them kicked out or thrown in jail, depending upon what they do. It's really that blue wall does not exist anymore. It hasn't existed for probably 20 years. Yeah, you find some here and there. I'm not saying it's completely gone, but one of the mantras back at LAPD was failure to report misconduct is misconduct. And
that's a good quote.
It is. And if, for instance, I knew somebody was stealing and I didn't report them, I got the same punishment they did for stealing. I didn't get lesser. I got the same punishment. And if that was, and I got fired, then I got fired for not reporting them stealing. That's simple. And so that helps keep people honest, is when you know that you are going to, if you let your buddy get away with something, you're going to go down for it too. That helps, you know, but it's not draconian. It's just kind of and really, and I keep coming back to Gates and Bratton. Gates was a cop's cop and Bratton was too. But they're the ones who started instilling this. I think Gates was the one who came up with the failure to report misconduct line, and Bratton severely enforced. I mean, starting at the very top, he enforced that, you know, from his commanders all the way down. He wanted zero corruption in the department. So Stephanie was a difficult case, and like I said, it angered a lot of cops. The forensics on it couldn't have been done earlier, but we were able to, and that's the reason we keep opening the cold cases. That's the reason we use familial DNA for the Grim Sleeper, who's probably one of the most prolific serial killers in America. We had him tied to 42 cases by DNA, although he was only convicted of 7. But that was strategic, because I asked the DA why he did that. It was very strategic to make sure he stayed in jail for life. And he's since passed, so it worked.